The words cut through the morning air with brutal force. "You look like a whole gorilla trying to squeeze into first class. Back of the line, animal." 30 passengers at gate 19 heard every syllable. Not one of them moved. Morgan Ellis felt her jaw tighten. Her fingers gripped the portfolio so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Yet when she spoke, her voice remained steady and calm. "Seat 2A, first class." She noted it silently, committing every detail to memory. The gate agent snatched her carry-on, holding it up as if it were something filthy, and dumped it onto the luggage cart. "Even your bag is falling apart." The clasp cracked open under the rough treatment, and her clothes spilled halfway out onto the dirty floor. Laughter erupted nearby. "Guess cheap follows cheap, huh?" Morgan Ellis glanced at her bag, then back at the form in her portfolio. She kept writing. This was no ordinary complaint. What had just happened was far worse. The man had no idea who she was, and by the time he found out, every single word he had spoken would cost him everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. At Charlotte Douglas International Airport, Terminal C, the sky outside was still dark, with only a thin line of orange bleeding across the horizon through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The terminal smelled of burnt coffee and floor cleaner. Gate announcements echoed overhead, bouncing off the tile floors and empty seats. Most passengers were half asleep, slumped in chairs with necks bent at awkward angles, jackets pulled over their faces like makeshift blankets. Gate 19 was quiet. The flight to Chicago O'Hare wasn't boarding yet. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past the empty check-in counter. The overhead lights buzzed with that low, tired hum every airport carries at dawn. This was the kind of morning where nothing was supposed to happen. But something was already in motion. Morgan Ellis stepped off the escalator and into Terminal C. She walked with purpose, neither fast nor slow. The kind of walk that said she knew exactly where she was going and didn't need anyone's help getting there. She wore dark slacks, a cream blouse, and a fitted black blazer. No logos, no designer labels on display. The only accessory was a slim silver watch on her left wrist. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her makeup was minimal, just enough to look professional without trying too hard. She pulled a leather carry-on behind her with one hand. A laptop bag hung from her shoulder. Under her arm, she carried a leather portfolio, the old-school kind with a brass clasp and a pen loop on the spine. She looked like any other businesswoman catching an early flight. That was exactly the point. Morgan Ellis was not just any passenger. She was the regional director of compliance and field audits for Summit Airlines. 12 years with the company. She had started as a gate agent herself, working the same counters, scanning the same boarding passes, dealing with the same angry passengers in the early morning hours. She had worked her way up, gate agent to shift lead to operations coordinator to regional compliance, and now director. Her job was simple on paper. Fly routes undercover, watch how staff treated passengers, file reports. Those reports could lead to retraining, suspension, or termination. Today was not a random trip. Gate 19 at Charlotte Douglas had received 14 passenger complaints in the last 6 months. 11 of those complaints named the same employee, a gate agent named Cole Harding. The complaints described the same patterns over and over: rude behavior, selective enforcement of baggage rules, racially targeted comments aimed at passengers of color. 14 complaints, 11 naming the same man, and not one had led to real action. Until now. Morgan Ellis had a pre-approved suspension authorization sitting in her portfolio, signed by Victor Lang, the Vice President of Operations. All she needed was field confirmation, to see it with her own eyes. She found a seat near Gate 19, set her bags down, and opened her portfolio. She uncapped her pen and began writing on the audit form. Then she waited. Cole Harding clocked in. He walked behind the counter like he owned the whole terminal. Stocky build, cropped hair, sunglasses pushed up on his head even indoors. He wore the standard Summit Airlines polo, but he had rolled the sleeves up tight around his biceps. A Bluetooth earpiece sat in his right ear. He dropped his thermos on the counter, popped the lid, and took a long sip. Then he leaned against the back wall and started chatting with a coworker, laughing loudly, without a care in the world. He didn't greet the first passenger who walked up, or the second. He let them stand there while he finished his conversation, then finally looked up with an expression that said, "You're interrupting me." Morgan Ellis watched all of this from her seat. She wrote it down. The gate area slowly filled. Business travelers in wrinkled suits, a young mother bouncing a toddler on her hip, a group of college kids in hoodies and slides. Eleanor Shaw, a white woman in her 60s with reading glasses and a paperback novel, settled into a seat 3 rows from the counter. She was a retired schoolteacher from Raleigh, quiet, observant, the kind of woman who notices everything and says nothing. Jamal Rivers, a black college student in a gray hoodie, sat near the window, earbuds in, scrolling his phone. He was flying home to Chicago for his mother's birthday. None of them knew what was about to happen. Morgan Ellis stood up, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the counter. She had the audit form ready, the suspension authorization in her portfolio, the complaint file memorized. All she needed was confirmation. Cole Harding was about to give her more than enough. She stepped up to the counter and set her boarding pass down gently. She didn't cut in line. She didn't raise her voice. She waited until the passenger before her finished, then stepped forward like any normal traveler. Cole was leaning against the back wall, thermos in hand, still mid-conversation with his coworker. He didn't look up. Morgan Ellis waited. 5 seconds. 10. 15. She cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me, I'd like to confirm my seat assignment, please." Cole held up one finger without turning around. The universal sign for wait. He kept talking, something about a football game the previous weekend. His coworker laughed. 20 seconds. 30. Morgan Ellis didn't tap the counter. She didn't sigh loud enough for him to hear. She stood still, hands folded over her portfolio, and waited. Finally, Cole turned around. He looked at Morgan Ellis the way you would look at a fly that had landed on your food. What? Not, "How can I help you?" Not, "Good morning." Just, "What?" "I'd like to confirm my seat, please. And I submitted an upgrade request last week. Could you check on that?" Cole picked up her boarding pass with 2 fingers, as if it were dirty. He glanced at it, then glanced at her. "Seat 2A, first class." He said it slowly, like the words didn't match the person standing in front of him. "That's correct." He tossed the boarding pass back on the counter. "Yeah, I don't think so. System probably glitched. You sure you didn't book basic economy?" "I'm sure. Seat 2A, first class. Confirmed." Cole sucked his teeth and turned to his screen. He typed something, clicked something, took his time. "All right, it says 2A. Fine. But that bag," he pointed at her carry-on, "that's oversized. You're going to have to gate check it." Morgan Ellis looked at her bag. It was a standard leather carry-on. She had flown with it dozens of times on Summit Airlines flights. It fit in the overhead bin on every single aircraft in the fleet. "This bag meets size requirements. I've traveled with it on this airline for years." "Well, today it doesn't meet my requirements. Gate check it, or you don't board. Would you like me to place it in the sizer? It'll fit." Cole leaned forward on the counter. "I don't need a sizer. I can eyeball it. And I'm telling you, it's too big. End of discussion." He reached under the counter, pulled out a pink gate check tag, and slapped it down next to her boarding pass. "Tag it. Check it, or step aside. Morgan Ellis didn't pick up the tag. She looked at Cole for a long moment. Then she said, calmly, "May I have your full name and employee ID, please?" Something flickered across Cole's face, just for a second. Then the smirk came back. "Cole, that's all you need. I'd like your last name and your badge number, please. And I'd like $1 million. His coworker behind him snorted a laugh, then turned away. Morgan Ellis noted his badge number anyway. It was right there on his lanyard. She wrote it in her portfolio without looking down. She had been doing this long enough to write blind. Then it happened. A white man in a navy blazer stepped up beside her. Mid-40s, leather duffel bag over his shoulder. A bag that was clearly, visibly larger than Morgan Ellis's carry-on, not by a little, by a lot. The zipper was straining. A rolled-up jacket was stuffed on top, making it bulge at the seams. Cole looked at the man, looked at his bag, and smiled. "Morning, sir. Boarding pass?" The man handed it over. Cole scanned it, handed it back. "You're all set. Gates open in about 20 minutes. Have a great flight." The man walked past. No bag check. No pink tag. No, that's oversized. Nothing. Morgan Ellis watched the whole thing. She didn't say a word. She just wrote it down. Cole caught her writing and leaned over the counter. "What are you doing? Writing a letter to the mayor or something?" He grinned. "That's cute. Real cute. I'd like to speak to a supervisor, please." Cole straightened up and crossed his arms. "You're looking at him. I'm the supervisor on duty right now." That was a lie. Morgan Ellis knew it was a lie. The station manager on shift was Carolyn Blake. Her name was on the duty roster Morgan Ellis had reviewed before arriving. Cole Harding was a gate agent, nothing more. "You're the supervisor," Morgan Ellis repeated. "That's what I said. So whatever little complaint you're working on, you can hand it right to me." He held out his hand and wiggled his fingers. "Come on, give it here. I'll file it for you." Morgan Ellis didn't hand him anything. She said, "I'd like to speak with Carolyn Blake, please." The smirk dropped, just for half a second. "Who told you that name?" "She's the station manager on duty. I'd like to speak with her." Cole's jaw shifted. He didn't like that she knew the name. He didn't like that she wasn't afraid of him. He didn't like any of this. "Carolyn's busy. You're dealing with me. Now step aside so I can board actual passengers." He waved the next person forward, an older white couple with matching rolling bags. Morgan Ellis didn't move. She stayed right there at the counter. "Ma'am," he cleared his throat, "I said step aside. And I said I'd like to speak with your station manager." Cole's nostrils flared. He picked up his walkie-talkie and pressed the button. But he didn't call Carolyn Blake. "Yeah, this is Harding at Gate 19. I need assistance. Got an uncooperative passenger here refusing to clear the boarding counter." He said it loud. He wanted her to hear. He wanted everyone to hear. Eleanor Shaw looked up from her paperback. Her reading glasses slid down her nose. She closed the book slowly, keeping one finger on her page. Jamal Rivers pulled one earbud out. The older couple that Cole had waved forward stepped back instead, not wanting any part of whatever was happening. Cole set the walkie-talkie down and turned back to Morgan Ellis. "Last chance, ma'am. Move, or I'll have security move you." Morgan Ellis opened her portfolio to a fresh page. She wrote down what he had just said into the walkie-talkie, word for word. Then she looked up at him. "I'm not going anywhere." Cole stared at her for 3 full seconds. Then he reached across the counter and grabbed her carry-on, the one he had already put a pink tag on. He didn't place it on the cart. He lifted it with one hand and threw it. It tumbled off the edge of the luggage cart and hit the ground behind the counter. The clasp, already cracked from before, broke completely. The bag flopped open. A blouse sleeve spilled out onto the dirty floor. 2 passengers gasped. A woman covered her mouth. Jamal Rivers raised his phone and hit record. Cole pointed at Morgan Ellis. There, your bag's checked. Now get out of my line before I have you escorted out of this airport." Morgan Ellis looked at her bag on the ground, her blouse on the dirty floor, the broken clasp. She took a slow breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Then she looked back at Cole, picked up her pen, and kept writing. Cole wasn't done. He was just getting started. He leaned over the counter toward Morgan Ellis like a man who had never been told no in his entire life. His voice dropped low, not quiet, just controlled. The kind of low that said, "I'm about to make your life very difficult. You know what your problem is? You people always think you're entitled to something. You walk up in here with your little attitude, your fake boarding pass, acting like you belong in first class. You don't. You never did. And everybody here knows it." He swept his hand across the gate area like the 30 passengers sitting there were his jury. Nobody nodded. Nobody agreed. But nobody spoke up either. Morgan Ellis kept her eyes on him, steady, unblinking. Her pen hovered over the form. "Are you done? Am I done?" Cole laughed and slapped the counter. "Oh, I haven't even started, sweetheart. You want to play this game? Fine, let's play." He picked up the desk phone. Not the walkie-talkie this time, the actual phone. He dialed 3 digits, the airport police extension, and put it on speaker. "Yeah, this is Cole Harding at Gate 19, Terminal C. I need officers here immediately. I've got a black female passenger causing a disturbance. She's being aggressive, refusing to comply with boarding procedures, and I feel threatened." He said, "black female," like he was filing a report on a stray dog. He said, "I feel threatened," while leaning casually on the counter with a smirk on his face. Morgan Ellis heard every word through the speaker. So did every passenger within 30 feet. She pulled out her personal phone, not to record, not to call anyone publicly. She opened her messages and texted Darius Holt, her colleague from the compliance office, who was in the airline's operations center in the same terminal. The text was short. Gate 19. It's everything the complaints described. Worse. Come now. Bring the file. She put her phone away and kept writing. Cole hung up the phone and crossed his arms. He was enjoying this now. You could see it in the way he rocked back on his heels, the way his chin tilted up, the way he looked at Morgan Ellis like she was already gone. "Police are on the way, ma'am. You had your chance to walk. Now you get to be walked." 3 minutes passed. The gate area was dead silent. The only sounds were the low hum of the AC system, a distant gate announcement for a Denver flight, and the scratch of Morgan Ellis's pen on paper. Then 2 airport security officers appeared at the end of the corridor, both in uniform, both walking with that deliberate heavy-paced security uses when they've been told there's a problem. Cole straightened up. He smoothed his polo. He put on his best concerned employee face. "Officers, thank you for coming. This woman here," he pointed at Morgan Ellis. "She's been causing problems since she got to my counter, refused a bag check, got aggressive with me. I asked her multiple times to step aside, and she won't move." The first officer, a tall man with a gray mustache, looked at Morgan Ellis. Then he looked at Cole. "Ma'am, can I see your ID and boarding pass?" Morgan Ellis handed them over without hesitation. No fumbling, no shaking hands. She held them out the way someone hands over documents when they've done absolutely nothing wrong. The officer looked at the boarding pass. "Seat 2A, first class." He looked at her ID. He looked back at her. "And what exactly happened here, sir?" He turned to Cole. "Like I said, she refused to gate check her bag, started getting hostile, and she's been standing here blocking the counter for the past 15 minutes. The second officer, a shorter woman with her hair pulled tight, looked at Morgan Ellis again. Hands at her sides, portfolio under her arm, pen clipped to the spine, standing perfectly still. "Ma'am, were you hostile?" "No, ma'am, I was not. I asked to confirm my seat. He demanded I gate check a regulation size bag. I asked for a supervisor. He refused and called you instead. The first officer turned to Cole. She asked for a supervisor, and you called us? Cole's jaw tightened. She was causing a scene. I used my judgment. Your judgment, the officer repeated, flat. Then Eleanor Shaw stood up. She was in her early 60s, a retired schoolteacher from Raleigh. She had been sitting there the entire time with her paperback in her lap and her reading glasses on her nose. She hadn't said a word until now. Officers, that is not what happened. Every head turned. I've been sitting right here. I watched the whole thing. That woman was polite from the moment she walked up to the counter. She asked for her seat. She asked about her bag. She asked for a supervisor. She never raised her voice once. Not once. Eleanor Shaw pointed at Cole. He insulted her. He threw her bag. Threw it. I watched her clothes fall out onto the floor, and then he called you and said she was aggressive. That was a lie. I watched the whole thing. Cole's face shifted. The smirk cracked. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It concerns every person sitting at this gate. Jamal Rivers stood up next. He held his phone at chest height, screen facing out. I got all of it on video. Everything. From the moment he grabbed her bag. Cole looked at Jamal, looked at the phone, looked at the officers. For the first time since Morgan Ellis walked up to his counter, Cole Harding looked unsure, but he recovered fast. Men like Cole always do. He turned to the officers and puffed his chest. Look, I don't care what these people think they saw. I have the authority to deny boarding to any passenger I deem disruptive. That's Summit Airlines policy. And this woman, he jabbed his finger toward Morgan Ellis, is denied boarding. He reached across the counter, picked up Morgan Ellis's boarding pass, the one the officer had just handed back to her, and tore it in half, right down the middle. Clean rip. He dropped both pieces on the counter like confetti. Done. She's off the flight. Officers, please escort her out. The gate area went dead. A woman in row 4 covered her mouth. A man in a business suit shook his head slowly. The young mother bouncing her toddler pulled the child closer. Morgan Ellis looked at the torn boarding pass. 2 halves sitting on the counter under the fluorescent light. She picked up both pieces carefully, like evidence. She placed them inside her portfolio right next to the form she had been writing on this whole time. The officers exchanged a glance. Neither of them moved to touch Morgan Ellis. The one with the gray mustache keyed his radio and spoke quietly into it. The shorter officer turned to Cole. Sir, we're going to need you to step back from the counter. What? I'm the one who called you, and we're asking you to step back. The 2 security officers stood between Morgan Ellis and Cole now. Cole was breathing hard. His face was red. The smirk was gone. In its place was something uglier, the look of a man who realized he might not be winning anymore, but refused to stop swinging. Morgan Ellis stood still. Portfolio closed. Pen clipped. Hands at her sides. She wasn't waiting for the officers to save her. She wasn't waiting for the passengers to defend her. She was waiting for Darius Holt, and right on time, she saw him. Walking down the corridor toward Gate 19 with a thick manila folder under his arm and a corporate Summit Airlines lanyard swinging from his neck. Not a field employee lanyard, not a gate agent badge. A corporate lanyard, the kind that opens every door in the building. He was walking fast, and he was not smiling. Darius Holt reached Gate 19 and walked straight past the security officers like they weren't there. He stopped beside Morgan Ellis and held out the manila folder. Director Ellis, the complaint file you requested. Director Ellis. 2 words. That was all it took. Cole's face went blank. Not angry. Not scared. Just empty. Like his brain heard the words but couldn't process them fast enough. The first security officer looked at Darius, looked at his corporate lanyard, looked at Morgan Ellis. Director, the officer repeated. Darius nodded. Morgan Ellis, Regional Director of Compliance and Field Audits, Summit Airlines. He said it clear. He said it loud enough for the entire gate area to hear. Not shouting, just the kind of voice that fills a room because every word matters. Cole's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Morgan Ellis took the folder from Darius and opened it right there on the counter. Inside were 14 printed complaints, each one dated and documented, each one describing the same patterns. Rude behavior, selective baggage enforcement, racially targeted language. 11 of the 14 named the same gate agent, Cole Harding. Beneath the complaints sat a single document with a blue signature line at the bottom. A pre-approved suspension authorization signed by Victor Lang, Vice President of Operations. The authorization had been pending. It needed only one thing to become active: field confirmation from a compliance director who witnessed the behavior firsthand. Morgan Ellis had more than enough. She turned to Cole. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. She spoke the way someone speaks when they don't need to prove anything. My name is Morgan Ellis. I am the Regional Director of Compliance and Field Audits for Summit Airlines. I was sent to this gate specifically because of you, Mr. Harding. She held up the form she had been writing on since the moment she walked up to his counter. This is a Field Audit Personnel Action Form. Section 1. Verbal abuse directed at a passenger based on race. Section 2. Selective enforcement of baggage policy. Section 3. Refusal to provide employee identification upon request. Section 4. False claim of supervisory authority. Section 5. Filing a false security report. Section 6. Deliberate destruction of a passenger's boarding pass. Section 7. Destruction of passenger property. She listed them the way a surgeon counts instruments. Clean, precise, no emotion wasted. 7 violations documented in a single interaction. You confirmed every complaint in this file before I even needed to open it. Cole grabbed the edge of the counter. His knuckles turned white. His mouth moved. But the words came out broken. You should have told me. How was I supposed to know? You should have said something. Morgan Ellis closed the folder. That's exactly the point, Mr. Harding. I shouldn't have had to tell you who I was for you to treat me like a human being. The woman before me shouldn't have had to. The 14 passengers who filed complaints before me shouldn't have had to. She paused. You didn't treat me that way because of what I did. You treated me that way because of what I look like. And you did it because you believed there would be no consequences. She set the folder on the counter between them. You were wrong. Cole's legs buckled slightly. He caught himself on the counter. His coworker behind him had gone completely pale and stepped as far back as the wall would allow. The passengers at Gate 19 were frozen. Eleanor Shaw had her hand pressed flat against her chest. Jamal Rivers was still recording, his phone steady, his mouth hanging open. Morgan Ellis turned to the security officers. Her voice was professional, calm. Officers, thank you for your time. You're welcome to stand down. This is now an internal airline personnel matter. She pulled out her radio, a company-issued handset she had been carrying in her laptop bag, and called Carolyn Blake. Carolyn, this is Morgan Ellis, Regional Compliance. I'm at Gate 19. Dome. I need you here now. 3 minutes later, Carolyn Blake appeared at the end of the corridor, walking fast, face tight. She already knew something had gone very, very wrong. Carolyn Blake arrived at Gate 19 out of breath. She was a white woman in her early 50s, neat gray blazer, Summit Airlines lanyard, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She had been station manager at Charlotte Douglas for 9 years. She had handled delays, cancellations, medical emergencies, and drunk passengers at 30,000 feet. But the look on her face when she saw Morgan Ellis standing at the counter said she had never walked into anything like this. Director Ellis, I came as fast as I could. What happened? Morgan Ellis didn't explain. She handed Carolyn the portfolio, the audit form, the complaint file, and the pre-approved suspension authorization, all of it. Carolyn read the audit form first. Her eyes moved line by line. Her lips pressed tighter with every section. When she got to Section 5, filing a false security report, her hand came up and covered her mouth. She looked at Cole. He was still standing behind the counter. His hands were shaking. His face had gone from red to gray. Mr. Harding. Carolyn's voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that's worse than yelling. Is what's written on this form accurate? Cole opened his mouth. Look, Carolyn, this whole thing got blown out of... Is it accurate? He swallowed. She didn't tell me who she was. I was just doing my... You called her a gorilla, Cole. Silence. Total silence. The AC hummed. A boarding announcement played 2 gates over. Nobody at Gate 19 breathed. You called a passenger, a director-level executive of this airline, a gorilla. You threw her bag on the ground. You tore up her boarding pass. You called airport police and told them she was aggressive when she was standing here with her hands at her sides. Carolyn set the portfolio down on the counter. And I'm now learning that this isn't the first time. 14 complaints, Cole. 14. 11 with your name on them. Cole's voice cracked. Carolyn, come on, you know me. Those complaints are... People exaggerate. You know how it... I know what I'm reading. And I know what these officers just witnessed. She turned to the security officers. Did you witness the boarding pass being torn? The officer with the gray mustache nodded. Yes, ma'am. We were present. Carolyn turned back to Cole. Mr. Harding, you are suspended from duty, effective immediately pending a full internal investigation. Please remove your lanyard and step away from the counter. Cole stared at her. His bottom lip trembled. He looked at Morgan Ellis. He looked at Darius. He looked at the security officers. He was searching for someone, anyone, who would take his side. Nobody did. Carolyn, please. I've been here 6 years. You can't just... Lanyard, now! Cole's hands went to his neck. He fumbled with the clip. His fingers were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries. When it finally came off, he held it out like it weighed 100 pounds. Carolyn took it from him without a word. Officers, please escort Mr. Harding to the employee exit. He is not to return to this terminal until further notice. The 2 officers stepped forward. Cole looked at them. The same officers he had called to remove Morgan Ellis. They were here for him now. He walked between them, head down, past every passenger he had performed for 20 minutes ago, past Eleanor Shaw, who watched him over her reading glasses without blinking, past Jamal Rivers, who lowered his phone but didn't stop recording until Cole disappeared around the corner. Gone. Carolyn turned to Morgan Ellis. Director Ellis, I am deeply sorry. I'll have a replacement boarding pass printed immediately. And your bag? The clasp is broken. My clothes were on the floor. Carolyn closed her eyes for a second. I'll have a replacement bag brought from our supply. Whatever was damaged, we'll replace it. All of it. Eleanor Shaw stood up from her seat and walked over. She stopped in front of Morgan Ellis and spoke softly. I'm glad someone finally held him accountable. He did something similar to a young man last month. I was on that flight too. I didn't say anything that time. Her voice wavered. I should have. Morgan Ellis looked at her. You said something today. That matters. Jamal Rivers walked over next, phone in his hand. I got the whole thing. From the bag throw to the boarding pass. You want me to send it to you? Morgan Ellis reached into her portfolio and pulled out a business card. Submit it through the airline's official complaint portal. The link's on the back. Your footage matters, not just for my case. Jamal took the card and nodded. Carolyn handed Morgan Ellis a fresh boarding pass. Seat 2A, first class. The same seat she had had all along. Morgan Ellis picked up her laptop bag, accepted the replacement carry-on a ground crew member brought over, and walked down the jet bridge. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She sat down in seat 2A, opened her laptop, and started typing the formal report. The cabin smelled like recycled air and fresh upholstery. The engine hum vibrated low through the floor. Outside the window, the sun had finally risen all the way. A clean line of gold across the Charlotte skyline. The flight to Chicago departed on time. Gate 19 was quiet again, but not for long. The investigation started before Morgan Ellis's flight even landed in Chicago. Carolyn Blake filed an emergency incident report within 30 minutes of Cole's removal. She attached Morgan Ellis's audit form, the pre-approved suspension authorization, and her own written account of what she witnessed when she arrived at Gate 19. By midday, the report was on Victor Lang's desk. Victor Lang, Vice President of Operations for Summit Airlines, a man who had spent 22 years building the airline's reputation and did not enjoy watching it burn. He read Morgan Ellis's audit form 3 times. Then he picked up the phone. By early afternoon, Summit Airlines had opened a formal internal review of all operations at Gate 19, Charlotte Douglas International Airport. The scope wasn't limited to Cole Harding. It covered every complaint filed against that gate in the past 18 months, every shift log, every duty roster, and every employee who had overlapped with Harding during his 6-year tenure. But Cole was the center of it, and the evidence was overwhelming. 14 passenger complaints, Morgan Ellis's 7-section audit form documenting live violations, testimony from 2 airport security officers, a written witness statement from Eleanor Shaw, and 43 minutes of unedited video from Jamal Rivers's phone. 43 minutes. Every word, every gesture, every smirk. Cole Harding was terminated 2 days after the incident. Not suspended pending review, not reassigned to another terminal. Terminated. His badge was deactivated. His access was revoked. His employee file was marked with a note that would follow him to any airline that ever ran a background check. 6 years behind that counter. Gone in 48 hours. But that was just the beginning. Jamal Rivers uploaded his video that same evening. He edited it down to 12 minutes, blurred the faces of bystanders, but left Cole's face fully visible. He was a gate agent in uniform, acting in an official capacity in a public terminal. There was no expectation of privacy. Jamal posted it with a single caption. This is what happened at Gate 19. By the next morning, the video had 600,000 views. By that night, 2.1 million. By Sunday, 4.2 million. The comment section exploded. Thousands of people sharing their own stories, their own Gate 19 moments, the times they were pulled aside, the times their bags were searched, the times they were told they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. The media picked it up the following day. Local news first. WCNC. Charlotte ran a segment that evening with the headline, Airline agent caught on camera hurling black passenger's bag. Turns out, she was his boss's boss. Then national. CNN, MSN, BC, CBS, Morning. The story moved fast because it had everything. The video, the racial slurs, the false police report, the torn boarding pass, and the twist that the woman he targeted was the one executive sent specifically to evaluate him. Reporters reached out to Summit Airlines for comment. For 24 hours, the airline said nothing. Then, on Monday morning, Victor Lang held a press conference at the airline's headquarters. He stood behind a podium with the Summit Airlines logo on the front. Navy suit, no smile. He read from a prepared statement, but his voice carried the weight of a man who meant every word. The airline confirmed that Cole Harding had been terminated for gross misconduct, including racial discrimination, destruction of passenger property, filing a false security report, and violation of Summit Airlines Code of Conduct. But Victor Lang didn't stop there. He announced 3 immediate actions. First, mandatory bias and de-escalation training for every customer-facing employee across all Summit Airlines hubs, effective within 90 days. Second, a new complaint escalation protocol that required any employee receiving 3 or more complaints within a 6-month window to be placed under automatic review. Third, an independent external audit of all discrimination-related complaints filed with the airline in the past 2 years. He called it a systemic failure that allowed one employee's behavior to continue unchecked for far too long. He didn't name Morgan Ellis directly, but he didn't need to. The legal consequences came next. Morgan Ellis filed a civil complaint against Summit Airlines and Cole Harding individually. The complaint cited racial discrimination, destruction of personal property, emotional distress, and denial of services based on race. Her attorney filed it in Mecklenburg County Superior Court 8 days after the incident. But it wasn't just civil. The Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office opened its own review after watching Jamal's video. The focus, Cole's phone call to airport police. He had told officers that Morgan Ellis was aggressive and that he felt threatened. The video showed a woman standing still with her hands at her sides. She never raised her voice. She never moved toward him. She never touched him. Cole had filed a false security report. In North Carolina, that's a Class 2 misdemeanor punishable by up to 60 days in jail and a fine of up to $1,000. But the DA's office pushed for a Class 1 misdemeanor under aggravating circumstances, arguing that the false report was racially motivated and made to a law enforcement entity, which elevated the potential consequences to up to 120 days in jail. Cole was formally charged 3 weeks after the incident. His attorney tried to negotiate. He offered community service. He offered a public apology. He offered to attend sensitivity training. The DA's office didn't budge. They wanted a guilty plea on record. It took 2 months. Cole's attorney filed 3 separate motions to dismiss. Each one was denied. The video was too clear. The witnesses were too consistent. The audit form was too detailed. Cole pleaded guilty. Judge Helen Carver sentenced him in a courtroom in downtown Charlotte on a Tuesday afternoon. The gallery was half full. Reporters, a few passengers from Gate 19, and 3 additional complainants who had come forward after the video went viral. The sentence: 180 days suspended, 2 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service at a civil rights organization in Charlotte, and a written public apology to be published on the Mecklenburg County Court website and submitted directly to Morgan Ellis. Cole read the apology in court. His hands shook. His voice was barely above a whisper. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. The civil case settled out of court 6 weeks later. The terms were confidential, but Summit Airlines issued one additional public commitment as part of the resolution: the creation of a permanent undercover compliance audit program embedded into the airline's operations manual nationwide. They named it the Ellis Protocol. Morgan Ellis's name permanently written into the system she had spent 12 years trying to fix. 3 more passengers came forward after the trial. One of them was the young man Eleanor Shaw had mentioned, a 24-year-old graduate student who had been berated by Cole at Gate 19 4 months before Morgan Ellis's visit. He had filed a complaint at the time. Nothing happened. Now something did. He received a private settlement and a personal letter of apology from Victor Lang. Eleanor Shaw was interviewed by a local Charlotte news station 2 days after the sentencing. She sat in her living room in Raleigh, reading glasses on, hands folded in her lap. The reporter asked her why she spoke up that day at the gate. Eleanor said, "I saw it happen twice. The first time I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't my business. I went home and I couldn't sleep. When I saw it happening again to that woman at that same gate, I decided I would never be quiet again. Silence is a choice, and I made the wrong one the first time. Her interview was shared over 300,000 times. So, where are they now? Morgan Ellis was promoted 6 months after the incident. She now serves as Vice President of Customer Experience and Compliance for Summit Airlines. She oversees the Ellis Protocol nationwide, the same program born from the worst morning of her career at Gate 19. She still flies undercover sometimes, not because she has to, because she wants to. She told a reporter once that the day she stops checking is the day the system stops working. Cole Harding completed his 200 hours of community service at a civil rights center in Charlotte. He spent most of those hours sorting donations in a back room. He never worked in the airline industry again. His name still pulls up the video if you search it. It probably always will. Jamal Rivers graduated from college the following spring. His video was cited in a congressional hearing on racial profiling in air travel, played on a screen in a Senate chamber in front of 14 lawmakers and a gallery full of cameras. Jamal didn't testify. He didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. He's a journalist now, covers civil rights for a digital newsroom in Chicago. He says Gate 19 changed the direction of his life. Eleanor Shaw volunteers with a passenger advocacy nonprofit based in Raleigh. She visits airports twice a month handing out pamphlets about passenger rights. She tells every person she meets the same thing. If you see something wrong, say something. Don't wait for the second time like I did. Summit Airlines completed its independent audit 8 months after the incident. The audit uncovered 23 additional complaints across 5 hubs that had been filed and ignored over the previous 2 years. 12 employees were retrained, 4 were terminated, 2 station managers were reassigned for failure to escalate. The Ellis Protocol is now permanent. Every Summit Airlines hub in the country operates under it. Undercover compliance directors fly random routes every week. Employees don't know when. They don't know who. That's the point, and that's what stays with me. Morgan Ellis had the title. She had the authority. She had the folder, the form, the pre-approved suspension letter. She had 12 years of climbing through the same system that failed the 14 passengers before her. She had power, and that power is the only reason justice happened at Gate 19 that morning. But what about the people who don't have that? What about the woman at Gate 19 4 months earlier who filed a complaint and never heard back? What about the graduate student who was humiliated in front of a full boarding area and told to just move on? What about every person who's been called an animal, told they don't belong, had their property thrown on the ground, and didn't have a suspension form in their portfolio? The system didn't protect them. The system protected Cole Harding for 6 years. 14 complaints, 11 named reports, until someone with more authority than him finally showed up. That shouldn't be what justice requires. You shouldn't need to outrank your abuser to be treated like a human being. You shouldn't need a title, a corporate lanyard, and a pre-signed authorization letter to get someone to stop calling you a gorilla. The system should work at Gate 19 for everyone, not just the director of compliance. So, here's my question. If you were sitting at that gate, watching Cole tear up that boarding pass, watching him throw her bag on the ground, watching him call the police on a woman who never raised her voice, what would you have done? Would you have been Eleanor the first time? Quiet, uncomfortable, telling yourself it wasn't your business? Or would you have been Eleanor the second time? Standing up, speaking out, refusing to let silence win? Drop it in the comments. I want to know. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you angry, if it made you think, if it reminded you of something you've seen or something you've lived, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories where the truth doesn't stay buried. Because silence is a choice, and the wrong one costs more than you think. 14 complaints. 6 years. Nothing happened until the one woman who chose to illuminate would be the one who could end it all with a single signature. We didn't have the title. She had the folder. She had the power. And that is the only reason that they show up at gate 19. But what about the 14 people before her? They filed complaints. They told the truth. And the system looked the other way. It took someone who outranked him to make anyone listen. Not because the evidence wasn't there. It was always there. But because the system was built to protect the uniform, not the person standing in front of it. We needed to just get Cole fired. She pulled something uncomfortable. Accountability shouldn't require a title, but that morning it did. So, here's my question. When you see something wrong, not in a story, not on a screen, but right in front of you, what do you decide? Whether you speak or stay silent? Is it courage? Is it convenience? Or is it whether anyone's watching? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe so you can catch the next one, because silence is a choice, and the wrong one always costs more than you think.